So let's take a look at, this is just a scene I made with a bunch of random shapes, and it's using default lights. But if you just like tweak the lighting and the fog and add some post-processing, such as bloom and camera blur, then you can get the scene to look much nicer, right? The other thing you can do is you can add particle systems. So particle systems are really easy to do, and they add so much to your scene. So I'm just gonna play this video. And as you can see, like just having a little movement there with these particle systems is gonna add a lot. The other part I wanna talk about is the other kind of movement you can add is animation. So you can do animation either through physics or you can do keyframe animation. But either way, whatever you decide to how you add animation to your game, it is also something where just a little bit of movement is gonna just bring life to the scene that you're working on. You know those free assets that I was talking about, like the Korean temple asset? Well, you know, we could actually add that to our scene, right? And walk around it. And then another cool thing, these physics objects, you can actually interact with them. So I'm gonna just like bump this kind of capsule, and then you see it like, you know, hitting that cube and throwing it off into the distance. But yeah, as you can see, yeah, just adding like those free assets to your scene can almost make this look like a level. And also, actually one thing, just by playing around with assets, moving them around, making a scene, you can actually kind of get ideas from this. Because when I did this, I was like, oh, maybe there's some cool, like, you know, like when you hit that capsule and it like hits the cube, maybe there's some kind of like cool physics like puzzler game you can make with this, right? So there's also some possibilities. But yeah, play around with it and it may generate you ideas for what game you might want to make. The other thing I want to talk to you about is the particle system component. And you saw that previously in the videos where you had the fire and things going on. But yeah, it's very easy to add a particle system. And particle systems, I'm gonna kind of a little bit talk about this so that you guys can kind of see like what it's doing. So in a particle system, I can change things like duration, but I can change things like, for example, renderer, right? Right now, the material is nothing, right? So I could change the material to, why don't I just change it to that material I made? So now you see that, look, these particles are now using that texture, right? So like, let me go back to this capsule. What's actually probably better is if you go here, there's these like default particle materials, right? So that probably makes more sense as a material for a particle, right? Okay, so rate over time, and then max particles is just telling it how many max particles you can have. Because if I do 10, then you know it goes to 10. If I do 1,000, it goes to 1,000. But yeah, I don't know, this could be like a snow particle effect. The cool thing here is that actually you don't need to use a billboard. So a billboard is basically a texture, right? It's just like basically a plane that has a texture applied. But cool, you can also like make this a mesh. I think this is kind of cool. So if I make this a mesh and I make the make the texture again something, I'm gonna make it a red cube, red material. But look there, that's kind of cool, right? It's like a bunch of like cubes not being spawned. So I don't know, that could be some kind of like stylized effect that you guys want to make. But the other thing you can do is like, you know, you can also do things like gravity modifier. Like let's make it 1. Now it's like a waterfall of cubes. I mean, I don't know why, you know, I don't know, maybe you would do that, I don't know. But also if you did -10, then it would, you know, shoot upwards, which is kind of cool, right? You know, maybe that's some kind of fire, like -5. Actually, probably what you would probably do is just turn off gravity, right? You would just not use gravity. And then you could adjust the speed. The start speed here could be like 10, right? But yeah, you can play around with these things. But again, like check out definitely examples online of what people do with this. Our example projects will also have things for you to take a look at. There's so many things that it's not enough time to cover in one lesson, but there's so many things you can do with particles. It's really fun to play with, so I encourage you guys to play with that. And again, any kind of movement, really easy to do, but adds a lot to your scene. Right, I just want to talk a little bit about the Fidelity pass. So we kind of talked about how to make things look pretty, right? So I just want to show you guys this scene, but I'm gonna turn off some of the stuff. But if you can see, without any of those things, like it's not, you know, it's not very interesting. But just by adding like this point light in, right, adding some lighting in, that already starts to look a little better. But if I go to the environment and I actually click on fog, turn on the fog, change the color of the fog, you can see already like, oh, this like looks like there's depth to this, right? And then if I go to the camera And actually, these are actually post-processing components, and which we can talk about too, which is basically these post-processing components. What they do is that they'll give you things like bloom, ambient occlusion, things like that. And I kind of want to walk you through this because it is like super simple to do, but it's actually like adds a lot to the visual fidelity. So let me turn on effects here. So as you can see there, I'm gonna go through this real quick, but this depth of field is something you can also add, which kind of blurs out the things in the background, which gives it even further depth. And then this ambient occlusion, if you'll notice like at the edges of things here, you'll see like a darkness. That's kind of like saying, hey, if there's crevices, it's not getting so much ambient light from the sky. Let's make that part darker, and it just kind of like browns things. So those kinds of things are pretty useful to have. So another part of the visual fidelity pass was the particle system. So if I play this, and we talked about that earlier, like how particle systems work. But again, like particle systems are super easy to do, and they add a lot to the visual effects of an object. And then finally, earlier we talked about animations, right? So you can add animations using physics, which right now, if you look at these objects that are bouncing, it just has a rigid body and it has this check mark to use gravity. And then now these objects are kind of bouncing around. Now, one other thing that this does have, and the reason it bounces around and it doesn't just fall and stop, is because we actually added this like physics material. So every collider has a material. This is not like a visual material. This is a material for physics. And basically the way you create a physics material is you go to here and you go to your project window, you go to your physics material, and you can create a physics material. I'm just gonna call this new physics material. And then with this new physics material, you can actually adjust like the settings here. But I'm gonna actually look for all physics materials. So I have two. I have this bouncy material. So what I did was I actually changed the bounciness to 0.98. I turned off friction, I turned off static friction, I changed this to 0.98. And now when you drag this material onto, let's say this black sphere here, right? Let's say this sphere didn't have a physics material. I'm gonna take it off. And you'll notice that now they're gonna fall and kind of just like stick to the ground or bounce around a little bit because it's falling from a great height. But if I go back and now add this physics material to it, and you can actually click here to add it through this window, or just like materials, you can drag it to the object like this. And then right now the new physics material is on there. Now when I hit play, it should go back to bouncing. So remember those like free assets you can grab, right? So one of the free assets I grabbed was this like Korean temple asset. So I actually added it to my scene. And now I'm just gonna play it for you guys and run around in it with you guys just to show you what this is. You know, these Korean assets are basically free, right? These temple assets, but they're pretty cool, right? It's like, you know, these are all free, right? Like they're pretty detailed, and they're free. So definitely we should, definitely explore those asset packages. Okay, so let's go back to create an object. Like go ahead and create like a cube, and then go ahead and create like a plane, and then go ahead and set this cube to transform. Let's set it numerically to 0, 0, 0, and then set this plane to also 0, 0, 0, and then let's go ahead and click. Okay, so the cube is hard to see, right? Because it's white. Let's go to our material, green material, and drag it on. Actually, we'll drag it onto the ground. So that makes more sense. It's like some really, really bright grass. Let's click on this cube, and I want you to just kind of move it around using, like if you hit this like, move tool, you can left click and kind of move your object around. So I kind of want you to do that. Go ahead and change the color of this material. I'm gonna click on this green material that we applied to the ground, and let's make it a more realistic green. So it's probably darker and it's probably not as saturated, right? Like grass is probably gonna be like that. But that's changing colors, right? So I want you guys to play around with this. I mean, it could be like, red, it could be like yellow, it could be anything you want really, but that's how you change the colors of the material. And actually, let's go ahead and click on the cube again. I'm actually gonna make another material real quick. You guys can follow along. So let's make a material called matte red material. All right, and then let's make it red. Drag it onto this cube, and then I'm gonna change the metallic. I'm gonna change the smoothness all the way to 1, and the metallic to 0.5, just so that you guys can kind of see the shading on this cube, right? Like a little easier. And then I want you guys to play around with just rotation. So click on this rotate tool, and on the axis, just move around, like click, left click, and then drag to move these around. I just want you guys to do that. But yeah, play around with this scale tool. Play around with this other scale tool. And yeah, also, if you click on the cube, hit Control D on PC, then you can actually duplicate your cube. And again, if you go to your transform component, you can actually zero all this out by typing 0 tab, 0 tab, 0 tab to go through all this and make it 0. Also, I believe there's a way to reset. Yeah, you can reset everything to defaults. Let me delete this. So if I were to change, a bunch of stuff, rotate it and move it. Well, actually, I don't think move gets reset. But if you right click on the transform and go reset, oh, it actually does move it to 0, 0, scales everything to 1. So I want you guys to do that. And then just real quick, I'm gonna click on this cube. I just wanna show you something where fog is really something that makes, really creates depth in your scene, and it's really easy to do. So I just wanna show you that because I think for me personally and a lot of other people, what's really cool when you start prototyping, the thing that motivates me or even your team is to, even with the prototype phase, trying to make that look as good as possible. Nothing fancy, you don't even need to put models in there, but try to make it look nice so that it just motivates people to want to work on it more, right? So I'm gonna, place this cube here, right? And I'm gonna duplicate this by hitting Control D. Actually, I need to be in this axis. So Control D. Yep, I'm gonna move these cubes, but what I'm gonna do also is if I hold Control and click these cubes, I can click multiple cubes, hit Control D, we'll move these cubes in the background, hit Control D again to move these cubes in the background. But now I wanna show you something about just creating depth, right? So if I go to camera, I'm gonna change the skybox to a solid color. I'm gonna pick a lighter blue color. Let me change this green material back to green, just so that it looks like it makes more sense. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to go to my camera, and you can see that you can switch between skybox and solid color, right? So I just want to switch to solid color. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to window, go to rendering and lighting, and I'm just going to quickly, let me pull over this lighting window, and I want to show you guys how to quickly add fog and just add depth to your scene. So if I go to environment, I'm going to turn on fog, right? And probably change this to 1. Okay, that's too much. So 0.5. That's too much. 0.25. 0.1. Okay, 0.1 looks like it works. Now, here's the cool thing. I want to change this fog color though to this blue color. So how do I do that? Well, if I go to this fog color by clicking on the color, I can click on this dropper and drop and just click on the sky dropper. And now my fog and my sky color, my fog and my camera background color matches. So now, as you can see, that fog really makes things push into the background, right? So I can make that even more by making this 0.2 or 0.1. But yeah, I just want to show you that because just adding that little bit of fog can really kind of make your scene feel more cohesive, and it's really easy to do.